There is a point in every life when you stand at the edge of your potential, not yet where you wish to be, but no longer who you used to be. The world presses forward with noise and demand, full of distractions dressed in urgency. But you're not here to perform for the crowd. You're here to become what the world cannot distract. Someone who is grounded, someone who is excellent, someone who has tamed the fire inside. You're not chasing perfection. You're chasing presence, mastery, purpose. And this pursuit requires something far more rare than ambition. It requires philosophy, not the kind found in classrooms, but the kind forged in adversity, in silence, in early mornings when no one claps, in lonely nights when your character speaks louder than your reputation. That's where Stoic philosophy lives, not on pedestals, but in practice. It's not ancient, it's alive. And it begins with one decision: that you will do your best. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, but as a daily devotion to who you could be if you stopped making excuses and started aligning your life with wisdom. So what does it mean to do your best? Not to do what's impressive, not to do what wins praise, but to do what your principles demand. To act as if every moment is a test, not of how much you can achieve, but of how deeply you can live in alignment. Because your life doesn't fall apart in one day. It erodes in the moments you choose comfort over clarity, distraction over direction, impulse over intention. And your best, the highest version of you, is built in those exact same moments when no one is watching, but your future is listening. The Stoics didn't speak of greatness the way modern culture does. They didn't care for applause or admiration. They cared about whether their soul remained intact, whether their actions matched their values, whether they chose reason over reaction. And this is what doing your best truly means. It is the quiet commitment to live your principles, even when the world tempts you to betray them. You rise early, not to impress, but to meet the day before it dictates your mind. You speak with precision, not to sound wise, but because clarity is an act of respect. You move slowly, deliberately, because haste is the ally of carelessness. You feel deeply, but act from strength, not from spite. There's nothing flashy about this life. It's built in the mundane, in how you respond to frustration, in how you manage boredom, in whether you finish what you start, in how you show up when the feeling has long faded but the responsibility remains. You learn to master yourself, not through domination, but through understanding. You observe your own mind like a calm commander watches the battlefield. You see the first spark of anger and choose to breathe. You see the creeping pull of procrastination and choose one small action instead. You see the rising fear, the urge to escape, and you sit with it, not to suffer, but to know it. Because once you see your patterns, you are no longer their prisoner. Doing your best is not dramatic. It is deliberate, and it begins with showing up for yourself. Not with grand gestures, right, but with small fidelities to your future self. You make your bed not because it's noble, but because it's the first promise you keep. You put down your phone not because it's evil, but because your attention is sacred. You hold your word, not because you're afraid of judgment, but because your integrity is your identity. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." You want to do your best? Start by treating time like gold, not gravel. Don't fill time. Don't pass time. Don't kill time. Use it. Direct it. Invest it. Measure it not by the hours that go by, but by the moments where you were truly present, fully engaged, doing what mattered. This is not intensity. This is clarity. And clarity is what makes discipline sustainable. You don't need more motivation, you need fewer distractions. You don't need a louder life, you need a quieter mind. You don't need more hours, you need more purpose per hour, and that comes from your philosophy. Because your actions are not random. They are downstream from what you believe. If you believe life owes you comfort, you'll avoid challenge. If you believe pain is punishment, you'll hide from growth. If you believe others control your worth, you'll always beg for approval. But when you start believing that your life is your responsibility, not your environment, not your past, not your mood, then your habits shift. Not out of force, but out of freedom. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start asking, "Does this honor who I'm becoming?" You stop waiting for ideal conditions. You start creating ideal choices. You stop chasing intensity. You start honoring consistency. And this quietly becomes the foundation of your best self, not born in hype, but in honest repetition. Because greatness is not the peak of performance. It's the depth of character repeated until it becomes second nature, and so you keep going. You wake up early, not to suffer, but to begin. You train, not to punish your body, but to clarify your mind. You write, not to impress others, but to understand yourself. You read, not to sound intelligent, but to become more intentional. You help, not to be seen, but because service is strength. You let go, not because you're weak, but because resentment is a chain that drags your future backward. You do your best, not for applause, not for perfection, not for outcome, but because the person you become in the process is worth the effort. The reason most people never reach their potential is not because they lack time, it's because they leak energy. They give themselves away. One distraction, one indulgence, one rationalized excuse at a time. They start strong. But when the emotion fades, so does their discipline. When the applause quiets, so does their commitment. When it gets hard, silent, boring, they stop. But the Stoic doesn't need noise to move. He moves from something deeper, a fire not stoked by validation, but by values. He doesn't ask, "What do I feel like doing today?" He asks, "What does my character require?" This shift is everything, because your best is not a mood. It is a vow. You don't live your best when it's easy. You live it when it's inconvenient. When the bed is warm but the work calls. When the world is loud, but you choose stillness. When the road is steep but you don't turn around. Most people think strength looks like power. But strength, real, enduring strength, looks like patience. Looks like waking up again. Looks like doing the right thing, especially when no one knows. That's when your best shows up. It's not the highlight moments that define you. It's how you show up when no one is clapping. It's how you carry yourself in the shadows, in the waiting, in the repetition that makes no promises. This is where Stoic excellence is born, not in controlling outcomes, but in controlling yourself. Seneca reminds us, "He who is brave is free." Brave enough to do what is right even when it's unpopular. Brave enough to persist when there's no shortcut. Brave enough to say no, not to others, but to the weaker parts of yourself. This is not about hustle culture. This is about soul, work about asking, what would the strongest version of me do right now? And then doing it. Not someday, not when you're motivated. Now, because now is all you truly own. And every time you delay, you trade your future for your comfort. This is why doing your best is not about intensity. It's about intimacy with your own standard. It's knowing when you're lying to yourself. It's holding the line when no one else does. It's showing up when every excuse is valid, but you still choose your values. And that doesn't happen by accident. It's built through relentless self-honesty. Ask yourself, did I give my full attention to what mattered today? Did I show up with presence, or just presence on paper? Did I align my actions with my standards, or just with my schedule? Your best isn't measured by how much you do, but by how intentionally you do it. It's not about checking boxes. It's about honoring the one thing no one else can see, your standard. This is how the Stoic moves. Not fast, but steady. Not loud, but certain. Not to impress, but to build something unshakable from within. He understands. True strength is invisible to those who don't know what to look for. It's not in the gym selfie. It's in the meal skipped out of discipline. It's in the silence, held instead of arguing. It's in the time spent alone reflecting when the world demands performance. These are the choices that forge your character. And your character is the ceiling of your potential. You don't rise by chance. You rise by choice, repeated, refined, repeated again. So you stop waiting for ideal conditions. You stop letting later become your lullaby. You stop confusing planning with progress. You stop letting your calendar be dictated by convenience. You declare every day, I am not here to live soft. I am not here to be agreeable. I am here to become unshakable. And then you act, without asking for permission, without checking if others approve, without checking how you feel about it first. This is the Stoic edge, to move from principle, not preference, to let your values lead, even when it costs you temporary comfort, to become so deeply aligned with your code that nothing, not failure, not applause, not doubt, can move you off path. You will fall. You will doubt. You will forget. But you return. You return not because you're perfect, but because you're loyal. Loyal to the standard you swore to uphold. Loyal to the man you are becoming. Loyal to the path even when it's quiet. That is doing your best. Not for applause, not for outcome, but because you refuse to settle for anything less. When you raise your standard, you stop negotiating with excuses. You no longer argue with your alarm clock. You no longer justify scrolling instead of studying. You no longer reason yourself into delay, softness, or temporary comfort. You simply do what your higher self would do, not because it's easy, but because it's right. This is what separates the committed from the curious, the anchored from the distracted, the warrior from the wanderer. You don't need to feel ready. You need to become reliable. Reliable not to your comfort zone, but to your code. Reliable not to the world's expectations, but to your own promise. Because emotional strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the refusal to be ruled by it. It is the ability to act on principle, not on preference. To live on mission, not on impulse. To choose the path of effort, not the path of ease. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being. He didn't wait to feel inspired. He reminded himself that duty is not optional, that discipline is not a feeling. It is a function of character, and character must be practiced. It's not something you recite, it's something you repeat. Every day you make the small, hard choice, you become someone different. Every day you do what's uncomfortable, you shed another layer of weakness. Every day you say no to what is easy, you say yes to your future. This is not about pushing endlessly. It's about choosing consciously. There is a massive difference between busy and aligned. Busy men chase movement. Aligned men protect momentum. Busy men sprint in all directions. Aligned men move one step, one task, one decision, but with clarity. And clarity for the Stoic comes from asking the most important question. Is this within my control? If yes, act with full power. If no, release with full peace. That's how you conserve energy. That's how you become consistent. That's how you stop being emotionally fragile, because your strength is no longer dictated by the world's weather, but by the weather of your soul. Most people are not tired because they're doing too much. They're tired because they're doing too little of what actually matters. Too much yes. Too much people-pleasing. Too much fake urgency. Too much shallow chasing. The Stoic cuts through that noise with one word. Enough. Enough excuses. Enough compromise. Enough pretending. You say it, not with rage, but with resolve. And when you do, your time returns. Your clarity returns. Your fire returns. You remember that you are not here to survive, but to build. Not to cope, but to lead. Not to perform, but to become. And becoming is uncomfortable. But the discomfort is the price of a life that means something. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. So don't curse the hardship. Use it. Let the delay sharpen your discipline. Let the rejection clarify your direction. Let the pain refine your posture. You are not here to be unscarred. You are here to be unshaken. And that requires a daily confrontation with your own lower self. The self that wants to delay. The self that wants comfort. The self that wants praise without pain. You meet that version of yourself every morning. And you must decide, who wins today? Will it be the man you've always been, or the man you're committed to becoming? That decision is not made once, it is made every hour, with every choice, with every breath. And if you can win that quiet battle, even once, you are not who you were yesterday. That's how you rise, not in leaps, but in loyalties. To your standard, to your stillness, to your story. Rewritten one action at a time. No one may see your work today. No one may praise it, no one may notice, that doesn't matter. The future you're building is watching, and it will reward you with a life that cannot be shaken, because it was built on something deeper than emotion. It was built on effort, on intention, on the quiet, relentless vow to never again abandon yourself for something easier. This is your path now. Walk it with courage, walk it with clarity, walk it, especially when it's hard, because that's when the old self dies and the new self begins to breathe. Every man has a moment when he wants to quit, a moment when the fire burns low, when the results don't match the effort, when the silence of the journey becomes louder than any encouragement. And in that moment, most walk away, not because they're weak, but because they were never rooted. But you are different now, because you have chosen to be driven not by feeling, but by principle, not by applause, but by alignment. This is what Stoic philosophy demands. Not that you feel strong, but that you act with strength, especially when you don't. Because your best work rarely feels like victory in the moment. It feels like fatigue, like frustration, like another repetition in the dark. But that's the paradox of greatness. It often looks like monotony from the inside. While others chase stimulation, you choose structure. While others drift, you return to discipline. While others escape, you endure. And that, quietly, patiently, makes you dangerous in the best way. Because now you're no longer fragile. You're no longer hoping for a perfect day. You're prepared to meet a difficult one, and still move with clarity. You're no longer waiting for motivation. You're moving from identity. The man you want to become is already being built, one action at a time, and you are loyal to that man even when it's hard, even when you're misunderstood, even when you feel behind, even when your mind whispers, "What's the point?" The point is this: you are practicing the rarest art left in the world. Consistency, not loud, not glamorous, not popular, but unbreakable. Seneca said, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power," and that kind of power is earned, not in a single act, but in a single standard, lived out relentlessly. That means showing up on the days your mind says not to, doing one more rep when your body says enough, finishing the task without needing to share it, respecting your word when no one would know if you broke it. That's emotional strength. It's not how you act when you're seen. It's how you act when no one is watching, but your future self is. Every repetition in the dark is a seed, and you may not see the fruit tomorrow. You may not see it next month. But that's not your job. Your job is to plant with integrity, to water with discipline, to wait with faith. Because the Stoic does not grow impatient with process. He honors it. He trusts that what is built slowly lasts longer, that what is forged in silence resists the storm, that what is rooted in truth cannot be toppled by emotion. This is the mindset that carries you when enthusiasm fades. It reminds you that the gym at 6 a.m. matters more than the likes at 6 p.m. That writing your thoughts when you're tired is more important than debating strangers online. That staying in your own lane, sharpening your own edge, building your own internal world, is where the real game is won. You don't need to win today. You need to be better than yesterday. Not in results, but in rhythm. Not in applause, but in alignment. Not in numbers, but in non-negotiables. And here's what happens when you commit to that. You stop chasing intensity. You stop chasing novelty. You stop chasing external confirmation. You become steady. And when you're steady, you become lethal. Not in aggression, but in focus. Not in speed, but in silence. Not in domination, but in discipline. And that kind of man is rare, because that kind of man cannot be manipulated, he cannot be distracted, he cannot be bought. He is not addicted to urgency. He is not swayed by trends. He is not moved by chaos. He moves only by decision, rooted in reason, guided by principle. And so you return every day, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because if you stop now, what was the cost of all those mornings, of all those sacrifices, of all those moments you could have chosen comfort but didn't? The pain of persistence is sharp, but the pain of regret is endless. So you keep going. You keep showing up. You keep refining. Not because you're guaranteed results, but because you refuse to be the man who walks away from himself. And when others look at you and ask, "How are you so calm? So focused? So consistent?" You smile, because the answer is not on the surface. It's in the hours they never saw. It's in the effort you gave when no one asked. It's in the days you returned when no one clapped. That's where strength is built, not by feeling strong, but by choosing to be unshakable. You were never meant to be a servant of your circumstances, but most people are. They become the reflection of whatever happens to them. Someone is rude, they become angry. Someone disappoints them, they become bitter. Life turns chaotic. They collapse inside. But the Stoic does not mirror the world. He anchors himself beneath it. He understands that emotion is a visitor, reaction is a choice, and character, that is the decision you make again and again when no one is forcing you. This is the fifth layer of doing your best, to reclaim your power of choice. Because everything in your life flows from that one truth, that you have the power to choose your response. You don't choose what happens. You choose what it means. You choose what you'll do next. And that is everything. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and a student of Stoic thought, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is your kingdom. When you stop filling it with noise and start filling it with clarity, your life begins to change. You don't lash out when provoked. You pause. You don't spiral when plans fail. You adapt. You don't absorb every emotion. You observe it, question it, and only keep what's useful. This isn't coldness. This is control. Control over what matters most, your inner world. Marcus Aurelius faced death, betrayal, war. Yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What most call power, position, wealth, recognition, the Stoic sees as distractions. Because if you can't rule your own thoughts, no kingdom outside will ever satisfy you. But if you can master your response, no external chaos can break you. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean you don't feel. You still feel. You still bleed. You still struggle. But you no longer outsource your state to circumstance. You no longer blame the weather for your lack of preparation. You no longer blame others for what is your responsibility to fix. You begin to build the ultimate form of discipline, emotional sovereignty, where your peace is no longer negotiable, where your focus is no longer for sale, where your mind becomes a fortress and you are the gatekeeper. This shows up in how you walk through the day. You stop rushing, because you've realized that speed without clarity is chaos. You stop complaining, because you've learned that blaming never built anything. You stop explaining yourself to everyone, because you've discovered that doing your best is already enough. You don't need to justify silence. You don't need to prove stillness. You don't need to explain why you protect your time like a sacred temple, because you understand something rare. That peace is not the absence of pressure. It's the ability to hold it without letting it leak into your soul. And that ability, that poise is only built by choosing the higher response again and again. Not once, not perfectly, but consistently. And over time, something powerful happens. The space between trigger and reaction widens. The time between stress and clarity shortens. The need to be understood fades and is replaced by a quiet inner knowing. You're no longer racing to fix everything. You're standing in what is and choosing who you'll be within it. That's where your best begins. Not in the plan, not in the outcome, but in the moment you remember you have a choice and you make one worthy of who you're becoming. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." Apply that to emotions, to attention, to peace. You don't need more control. You need less craving. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need deeper self-command, and that command grows with each small moment you reclaim. The moment you breathe instead of snap. The moment you listen instead of judge. The moment you let go instead of hold on just to be right. These are the decisions that don't go viral, that don't win awards, that don't get applause, but they build something far greater. A life that doesn't break when the world does, and you are here to build that. Not someday. Now. In the next choice, the next moment, the next breath. Because you've stopped waiting for control. You've started becoming it. Expectations are the chains we build with our own hands. We place them on others, how they should treat us, speak to us, value us. We place them on life, how it should unfold, how quickly it should reward us. And then we suffer, not because people fail us, but because they fail to match the version of them we created in our minds. Not because life is unfair, but because it's not behaving according to the script we wrote in secret. The Stoic sees this trap early, and he steps out of it by doing something radical. He stops expecting the world to be perfect. He starts preparing himself to meet it with strength, no matter what it brings. Epictetus taught, when you are about to put your hand to some action, remind yourself what kind of action it is. If you go out to bathe, keep in mind what happens at public baths. People splashing, pushing, stealing. You will not be annoyed if you prepare for it. It sounds simple, it is not. Because the modern mind is addicted to false certainty. It craves control over how others speak, feel, react. It wants a guarantee that effort will bring applause, that love will be returned, that truth will be understood. But Stoic strength is built by choosing peace without a guarantee. By removing the conditions placed on your calm. By showing up to every day, not asking, will this go the way I want? But declaring, I will do what I came here to do, regardless. This is not pessimism. It is preparation. It's not detachment from people. It's detachment from illusion. You don't lower your standards. You lower your dependency on others living up to them. You stop giving your peace away to what you cannot control, and you reclaim it by owning what you can. Your mindset, your effort, your meaning. Because your best work is poisoned by expectation. You record the podcast and secretly expect it to go viral. You show kindness and secretly expect appreciation. You work for years and secretly expect the breakthrough now. And when those things don't happen, disappointment grows like rust. But the Stoic smiles at the storm, not because he enjoys it, but because he trained for it. He didn't promise himself outcomes. He promised himself presence. He didn't attach to reward. He attached to process. He didn't link effort to applause. He linked it to integrity. That's the shift. When you no longer need recognition to validate your routine. When you no longer need fairness to justify your fortitude. When you no longer need instant progress to remain committed. Now, you are dangerous. Because now, you are free. You give without keeping score. You serve without expectation. You build without demanding results on your timeline. And ironically, this is when results come faster, because your energy is no longer fragmented by disappointment. Your mind is no longer clouded by bitterness. Your days are no longer spent explaining what didn't happen. You're too focused on becoming who you're meant to be, regardless of whether the world notices, and eventually, it does. But by then, you no longer need it to. Seneca reminds us, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." And what greater form of power is there than the ability to walk into any situation, chaotic, quiet, unfair, uncertain, and say, "I expected nothing, and I came prepared for everything." Let's begin. This is how the Stoic lives. Not predicting the weather, but mastering the sail. Not controlling the terrain, but sharpening the step. Not waiting for the perfect moment, but becoming ready in every moment. This is what allows you to keep doing your best without burnout. Because your energy is no longer wasted on resentment. Because your emotions are no longer tangled in unmet expectations. Because your peace is no longer built on things you can't control. Now you're focused. Now you're still. Now you're sharp. And from that clarity, your effort compounds. Not for instant rewards, but for permanent transformation. You no longer ask life to bend to your desires. You bend yourself into someone who's ready for whatever life brings. Discipline is not what you do, it's what you return to and when no one is watching. The world celebrates motivation. It loves the fire, the hype, the surge of energy. But motivation is mood. Discipline is identity. One fades, the other forms you. And that's where your best begins. Not when you feel inspired, but when you do what you said you'd do, even when every part of you would rather delay. This is the seventh layer of doing your best. To become loyal to discipline, not when it's easy, but when it's invisible. To show up on the cold mornings, to write when the words feel stale, to train when your body is tired, to finish what you started, not for praise, but because you said you would. Marcus Aurelius said, "Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. Not how you feel, not who saw it, not whether the outcome came quickly. You act, you commit, you close the loop. That is what makes a person trustworthy, not to others, but to themselves. Because until you can trust yourself, you will always question your potential, but once you do, once you know that when you say yes to something, you follow through, once you know that your standards are not mood-based, they are coded into how you breathe, now you are unstoppable. Not because you have more talent, but because your habits outlast your weakness. You move from decision and not emotion. You write the book even if no one reads it. You run the mile even if no one's watching. You say no to the shortcut even if no one would have known, because you know. And that's enough. The Stoic sees discipline not as suffering, but as structure. Not as sacrifice, but as sovereignty. Because without it, you're a slave to your impulses. You're chained to your mood. You're lost in the fog of fleeting pleasure. Discipline clears the fog. It reminds you what you truly want. Not in the next 10 minutes, but in the next 10 years. It aligns your day with your destiny. It lets you look yourself in the mirror and not flinch because you kept the vow. You honored the structure. You stayed. That's what doing your best looks like. Not heroic, not cinematic, but consistent. And consistency is the greatest threat to mediocrity. It wears down resistance. It chips away at fear. It builds a body of work, even when your mind doubts it. And that's why most people will never build anything timeless. Because they stop every time they feel uninspired. They pause every time they feel tired. They wait for the right mood, the right moment, the right validation. But the Stoic waits for none of those. He rises. He does the work. He returns again and again to what he said matters. That return is what makes him elite, not his speed, not his strength, his return. He may fall, but he comes back. He may doubt, but he shows up anyway. He may want to quit, but he chooses to remain. Because this is no longer about reward. It's about who he is. When you understand this, your whole relationship with effort changes. You stop chasing the finish line. You stop trying to be perfect. You stop seeking shortcuts, and you start showing up. For the process, for the path, for the peace that comes with keeping your promise. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance, and no man becomes his best self by waiting for the right conditions. You do the work, you honor the schedule, you protect the rhythm, and through that rhythm, you become powerful, not in bursts but in roots. You become known, not by everyone, but by your future self who thanks you silently for not abandoning the mission when no one else would have known if you did." That is what Stoic discipline is: a private allegiance to your potential, a quiet declaration that your word is law to you. You live by it, you return to it, and you build a life that doesn't collapse, because it was never held up by mood in the first place. If you don't decide who you are, the world will do it for you. It will label you. It will measure you by its own fragile metrics: likes, speed, noise, surface. It will tell you who to be based on what sells, what's safe, what fits in. And if you don't have a purpose rooted deep within your soul, you will drift from trend to trend, from opinion to opinion, from life to life, but never your own. This is the 8th layer of doing your best: to build your life around purpose, not preference. Purpose is not passion. It's not excitement. It's not dopamine dressed up as destiny. Purpose is the quiet clarity that comes from asking yourself one question: what am I here to do, even if no one ever claps for it? The Stoics never chased glory. They chased alignment. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with all the power in the world, still wrote in his journal, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." He didn't chase purpose outside himself. He lived it. In how he ruled, how he walked, how he endured. Purpose is not found. It's forged. In the dark. In the silence. In the tension between what you feel like doing and what you know is right. You do not stumble into it. You commit to it. Daily. And once you do, your days stop being random. Your decisions gain weight. Your actions begin to echo. Because now, you're not just moving, you're aimed. That aim gives shape to your energy. It gives focus to your fire. It gives order to your chaos. Purpose doesn't make life easier. It makes it heavier, but in the best way. Now, you carry something. Now, you endure longer. Because quitting would mean betraying something deeper than a goal. It would mean betraying your reason for being. That's why the Stoic returns to purpose again and again. Not to feel special, but to stay sane. Because the world will tempt you to perform, to conform, to dilute yourself for the comfort of fitting in. But the man of purpose lives outside that system, not in rebellion, but in reverence. He reveres what is true, what is lasting, what cannot be bought, sold, or celebrated on a screen. And that kind of life has gravity. You walk into a room and people can feel it. Not because you're loud, but because you're rooted. Not because you're polished, but because you're pointed. You're not scattered anymore. You're specific. You're sharpened. You're sure. You don't need everyone to agree. You don't need applause to stay on track. You don't need results tomorrow. You just need to stay loyal to your aim, and your actions will begin to shape the world around it. That's how you do your best. Not by chasing the perfect move, but by repeating the right one until it carves something eternal. And when doubt comes, as it will, you return to the mission. You ask yourself, does this choice serve my aim? Does this behavior honor my direction? Does this habit pull me closer or further? Seneca wrote, "To live is to act, and to act is to choose. But if you don't know where you're headed, you cannot choose wisely. You will say yes to too much. You will give yourself away to what doesn't matter. You will waste years, and because you never stop long enough to ask, what matters to me, not what's expected, not what's easy, not what's trending. What is essential? Because once you know that, everything else becomes noise. The opinions, the pressure, the doubt, they're still there, but they no longer enter. Because your path is locked, not externally, internally. That's the Stoic advantage. Purpose not as performance, but as compass. You may get lost, you may drift, but you will return because you know what you serve. You know why you're here, and that knowing, that aim, makes you unshakable. There will be days when nothing works, when your effort feels invisible, when progress is slow, when silence replaces celebration, when the path feels longer than your faith can carry. And most people quit in that moment, not because they can't go on, but because they no longer believe it's worth it. But the Stoic sees this moment for what it is, a test, not of skill, but of will, not of talent, but of tolerance, of how long you can endure when the world gives you nothing, but your values still ask for everything. This is the 9th layer of doing your best, to remain when there is no reward, and act as if you were seen by eternity itself. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, and sometimes to keep going is the loudest way to say, 'You will not break me.' You don't keep going because it's fun. You keep going because stopping would mean betrayal of your code, your character, your calling, because you've already buried too many mornings in the graveyard of excuses. You've already surrendered too many dreams to the hands of temporary feelings. You've already told yourself later more times than you can count. Now you are done with that voice. Now you are quieting the fear by speaking through your action. Now you are proving to yourself that your strength is not built in intensity, but in persistence. That means showing up when you're not at your best, but giving the best of what you have. That means learning to separate your feelings from your focus. You may feel tired, but you are still capable. You may feel uncertain, but the next step is still clear. You may feel uninspired, but the habit is still yours to keep. This is where most people confuse strength with motivation. Motivation is emotion, strength is behavior. The Stoic doesn't ask for ease. He asks for endurance. He doesn't demand applause. He demands presence. He doesn't say, "Will this work?" He says, "Will I show up anyway?" Because in that showing up, again and again, you chip away the part of you that needed to be rescued. You stop waiting for the answer to appear. You become the one who answers through effort. And here's what no one says loud enough. It's not the result that changes you, it's the rhythm, the routine, the repetition. The man who keeps going becomes unrecognizable, not because of what he achieves, but because of who he stops being. He stops being a slave to emotion. He stops being addicted to immediate feedback. He stops being driven by the fantasy of breakthrough, and he begins to love the ordinary, the quiet, the difficult, because he knows this is where few remain, and that's where greatness is born. Not from fire, but from friction, not from spark, but from sustained heat. So when the voices in your head say, "It's not working," "This isn't worth it," why bother? You answer with one thing: consistency. Because consistency is the argument that ends all doubt. It silences excuses. It shames weakness. It builds trust with the future. The Stoic doesn't need to win today. He just needs to remain standing. He just needs to honor the vow, to not abandon the path when it gets dark. Because the man who walks through the storm without needing the sky to clear, that man becomes unshakable. And one day, when the dust settles, when the noise fades, when the crowd finally looks up, they'll ask, how did he become that? And the answer will be this: he did not give up when it was hard. He did not stop when it was quiet. He did not need applause to keep his rhythm. He showed up, he stayed, he endured, and that not success, not fame, not fortune is what makes a man truly powerful. The strongest tree is not the one that never bends. It is the one that bends without breaking, because life will bend you again and again, with delay, with loss, with failure, with detours that seem designed to mock your direction. And you can either curse the wind, or you can learn how to lean with it. This is the 10th layer of doing your best. Adapt, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. The Stoic does not worship rigidity. He worships truth. And truth is not always what you planned. Truth is what remains when the plan collapses, and you choose to respond instead of retreat. Most people don't break because life is too hard. They break because they were too attached to how it should have been. But the Stoic holds his vision loosely and his principles tightly. He can adjust the strategy, he can revise the route, but he never abandons his internal compass. Epictetus said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things." So when the world changes, the Stoic doesn't say, "This shouldn't be happening." He says, "This is happening. What now?" That's power, not to control what happens, but to control what it becomes through your response. You get injured. You train your mind. You lose the job. You deepen your skill. You're rejected. You sharpen your edge. You fall behind. You recalibrate with humility. You stop demanding straight lines and start walking through the crooked ones with clarity. Because this is what separates those who live aligned from those who fall apart. The aligned man isn't married to a method. He's married to his mission. So when life says no, he doesn't cry. He listens. He doesn't say, "Why me?" He says, "What for?" He doesn't say, "This ruined everything." He says, "This reveals something." This is not toxic positivity. This is tactical perception. It's understanding that you do not control the river, but you do control the rudder. You do not control the waves, but you do control the sail. And sometimes, the most stoic thing you can do is let go of what you thought would happen, so you can meet what is actually here with full presence. Let go of the perfect conditions. Let go of the fairy tale plan. Let go of the rigid identity you built before life tested you. Because who you are becoming is not the person who got everything right, but the person who keeps moving with integrity, no matter what goes wrong. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. So stop fighting the friction. Use it. Let the difficulty develop your patience. Let the uncertainty strengthen your faith. Let the change refine your clarity, because your best is not built in certainty, it's revealed in chaos. When everything changes and you don't, that's stubbornness. But when everything changes and you remain true while adjusting, that's mastery. And that mastery is not born from ego, but from presence. The presence to stay with what is, to move forward without flinching, to find peace without needing explanation. Because most people want peace, but only on their terms. They want growth, but only without pressure. They want clarity, but only when it's convenient. The Stoic wants truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it comes disguised as failure, even if it arrives without warning, because he knows the strongest mind is the most flexible, the calmest heart is the most resilient, and the most powerful man is the one who remains fluid in principle and firm in direction. So when the day doesn't go your way, smile. It didn't have to. You came prepared to meet whatever comes, not to manipulate it, but to mold yourself inside it, because you are no longer here to force the world to behave. You are here to behave rightly, no matter what the world does. To do your best, you don't just need strength, you need reverence, because a man who does not revere the gift of this life will never give it his full effort. This is the 11th layer of Stoic living, gratitude, not as sentiment, but as structure. Not as something you write in a journal once a week, but something you breathe, embody, and live, especially when things feel ordinary. The Stoic wakes up each day not with entitlement, but with awareness. He opens his eyes and says, "I am alive." That alone is enough reason to do something excellent today, because he knows life does not owe him another sunrise. This breath, this body, this hour, they are borrowed, and to waste them is to insult the generosity of nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." That's what real gratitude is. Not writing lists of blessings, but living like you know they won't. Bless, that means taking the time to speak gently because you may not get the chance again. That means taking the extra step because your legs work today. That means staying in the struggle because the struggle means you're still in the game. Gratitude is not passive. It's the deepest fuel for discipline, because when you stop seeing life as a right, you start treating every responsibility like a privilege. You no longer need everything to go your way. You just need to be present enough to see that something always does. You start noticing the small, the light through the window, the steadiness of your breath, the silence between your thoughts, and that noticing becomes a weapon against laziness, against resentment, against the creeping bitterness of modern life. You stop waiting for the big moment to be grateful. You start using gratitude to turn this moment into something big. Because everything you're rushing toward, there was once a version of you that would have begged to be where you are now. And the Stoic never forgets that. He doesn't complain that it's hard. He remembers that he's capable. He doesn't curse the work. He remembers that he has strength. He doesn't resent the silence. He remembers that peace is often quiet. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. But a man who can look at what he has and see abundance, that man is rich before he ever adds a single thing, and he becomes magnetic, because presence is magnetic, clarity is magnetic, gratitude lived out loud, not as noise, but as quiet, poise is magnetic." You walk into the room differently when you no longer feel like the world owes you anything. You speak differently when your voice is grounded in appreciation, not in lack. You work differently when you're building from fullness, not from fear. Gratitude rewires your nervous system. It gives you energy you didn't know you had. It calms the chaos. It stabilizes the storm inside you, not by removing the wind, but by reminding you that you've stood through worse, so you return to the task, to the breath, to the moment, not because it's special, but because it's yours. And when you live like that, when your discipline becomes an act of reverence and there is no wasted effort, there is no small step, there is no mundane task, everything becomes sacred, because you stopped demanding that. Life impressed you, and you started impressing your discipline upon life. You've heard the noise of the world. Now listen to the sound of your own breath. Steady, present, unshaken. This is what it means to live stoic. To stop waiting for permission. To stop outsourcing your peace. To stop asking the world to be different. And start becoming different within yourself. This is the 12th and final layer. To embody, not just apply, the philosophy you carry. Because all the ideas mean nothing if they don't show up in your walk, in your gaze, in your tone, in how you speak when angry and how you move when tired, in how you treat the weakest person in the room. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." This is not a performance. This is a quiet transformation. Not in one day, but in thousands, stacked, lived, unseen by most, but undeniable in presence. The man who lives like this becomes his own mountain. He does not rise and fall with mood. He does not seek applause. He does not shake at the sound of rejection. He is still because he has wrestled with chaos and chosen order. He is focused because he has buried his distractions in the soil of higher purpose. He is strong, not because he never falls, but because he always returns. That is your call now. not to do more, but to become more. Through the way you carry this hour, through the way you rise tomorrow, through the way you close your eyes tonight, knowing that your day was not perfect, but it was lived with presence. That's all life ever asks of you, to show up with integrity, to meet what's in front of you without flinching, to stop chasing your best and start creating it one decision at a time, not from pressure, but from peace, not from image, but from identity, because a Stoic knows you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to conquer the world to be powerful. You don't have to be perfect, my vieux. You just have to be principled. Every morning, you rise. Not to check boxes, but to keep your word. Not to prove something, but to protect something, your dignity. Every evening you look in the mirror, not for flawlessness, but for honesty. Did you return to your values when tested? Did you speak slowly when provoked? Did you breathe before responding? Did you act from strength, not spike? That's what your best looks like. Not in one heroic act, but in the slow, steady stacking of moments that seem small until they become who you are. And when life breaks open, as it will, when people disappoint you, and as they will, when the weight feels too much, as it sometimes will, you will remain, because your strength is no longer conditional. Your excellence is no longer borrowed. Your calm is no longer dependent. You built it, brick by brick, virtue by virtue, choice by choice. And now, no one can take it. That's what Stoicism gives you. Not escape, but access to the deepest power you've always had. The power to stay, the power to choose, the power to rise. So breathe and begin. Subscribe to Stoic philosophy for life, where silence builds strength, discipline shapes destiny, and wisdom leads the way. Because you're no longer chasing the world, you are becoming the calm in its center.